Welcome to our playlist, exploring the history of North Africa and the Mediterranean. In this video we said we're going to look at an account from the book of Jasher. We're going to be looking at chapter 60 and just focusing on a small part and just trying to dissect this small part. But let's first get an idea of the timeline or the time frame. So it says the Israelites going down into Egypt. So that gives us a good idea of the history that we're speaking about. But it's after the death of Joseph. So I'm just going to use this page, AmazingBibleTimeline.com. There's going to be different ideas about this. So I'm not saying this is the most accurate, but just that we got something to work with. So we're going to be saying that we're roughly in this period of 1750 BC for this account. Just so we got a rough idea of the timeline for this account that we're looking at. And the main character of this story is a character called Zepho, the son of Eliphaz, the son of Esau. And it's saying that he's fleeing from Egypt. So how did he get into Egypt? Just a quick background. There was a war between the Israelites and the descendants of Esau. And the Israelites were victorious, and they took captives with them into Egypt. And Zepho was one of these captives. But now, largely because of the death of Joseph, the landscape's going to change now. And it seems at this point, Zepho is able to escape. But where does he flee to? That's what we're going to focus on. And he came to Africa, which is Daaba, to Angeas, king of Africa. And Angeas received them with great honor, and he made Zepho the captain of his host. And Zepho found favor in the sight of Angeas and in the sight of his people. And Zepho was captain of the host to Angeas, king of Africa, for many days. So now we've got a very interesting account to think about for this region we've been studying. But let's try to dissect a few of these details. So what does it mean when it says Zepho is fleeing to the king of Africa? Are we to picture something like this? Is he king of Africa, or is it something different? So let's just recap one of these sources that we've used on the channel. So this is Josephus and his Antiquities. We'll just read this part out. It is related of this Ophron that he made war against Libya and took it, and that his grandchildren, when they inhabited it, called it from his name Africa. So this source telling us that the name Africa is coming from a descendant of Midian called Ophron. So this would mean that you could maybe use Libya and Africa interchangeably. So the territory of Libya or the territory of Africa, and the boundaries of Libya, have changed over time. So it's not easy to, to think definitely what it's speaking about with when it says the war against Libya. But can we be more specific than just thinking about, either Libya or Africa for these details with the book of Jasher and the king of Africa? So let's think about Daaba. Now I did come across a scholar, Ken Johnson, and it's called The Ancient Post-Flood History. And according to Ken Johnson, we should be looking for Daaba in Algeria. So connects Daaba with this name Anaba. And this would be close to where the future kingdom of Carthage would be founded. So this is maybe what we should be thinking about. So you see here we've got where the kingdom of Carthage was, and notice here we have the province of Africa, predominantly, let's say, the modern day country of Tunisia. So according to this scholar, this Daaba, is in this region here. So is this actually what we should be picturing? So when it says the king of Africa, we're not thinking in this context, which is more of a modern context. We could be thinking about, this province of Africa, the way it's, depicted here. But now this is saying, a kingdom. It's a king of Africa, it's a kingdom. So that's why this is very interesting for us to think about, because think about the time frame. This is 1750 BC. We've got a kingdom in northern Africa. I remember when I say that, I'm using this context. So we have to try to think about the context that we're using. So let's carry on with this, because what I'd like to think about now is I'm not going to read you this story, because you can always look at this in your own time if you'd like to. We're going to try and look at who is this Angeas, king of Africa. And I did come across one researcher making the link to a character in the mythology called Angeas. Angeas ruled over Africa. So this is largely based on the similarity of the names. So not exactly the same, but it's quite close. So from the book of Jasher, Angeas, and in the mythology, Angeas. And why this one is quite interesting is because it speaks about the brother of the king of Africa being called Lycus, or Lucus. And it says that Lucus was the king of Sardinia. So this island here. So now we've got, in this account of the book of Jasher, we've got a king of Sardinia, so a kingdom of Sardinia. And this is why it kind of makes sense to think about the king of Africa being connected with this region of ancient Carthage, or this kingdom of Africa here, because you can see the relationship between the king of Africa and his brother Lucus, king of Sardinia. So yeah, that's why this one's quite interesting, because Angeas, who in the mythology is described as the goat man, or the king of Athens, does have a brother called Lycus. So we see, he's got a brother called Lycus. So yeah, very interesting for that connection. So you've got the similarity of the names, but then you also do have a famous brother with the same name, also with a kingdom. But obviously the details don't match up exactly. So we'll come back to that at the end. So Angeas, king of Athens, did he rule over Africa? And he did have a brother. So that one's interesting. But looking at this ancient post-flood history by Ken Johnson, he identifies a different character in the mythology and speaks of Aeneas. Now remember, we did speak about Aeneas, the Trojan prince. We spoke about the legendary founding of Carthage, that it was founded by Dido, and that there was that relationship with Aeneas and Dido. So that would bring Aeneas, the Trojan prince, into this region. But was he actually the king of Africa? Because it is quite interesting that, this story from the book of Jasher, chapter 60, it does sound quite similar to the mythology around Aeneas. And I've just written it down so it's easier for us to go through. So this is the account that comes to us from the book of Jasher. So we see Angeas, we see Lucus, and the rival is Turnus for Janea. If we could just say like a princess they're fighting over. And it's very similar to the story of Aeneas in the mythology, because there's also a war for a princess, but it's Lavinia. But notice the adversary is also Turnus. So in the book of Jasher, it's Turnus, king of the Babentu, but in the story of Aeneas, it's Turnus, king of the Rutuli. And Aeneas also has a companion called Lycus. So we see that name Lycus. Let me just show you where I'm getting it from. So there's lots of different Lycuses in this mythology, but there is a companion of Aeneas, and then it's got another one here, Lycus, actually killed by Turnus. So yeah, all we can say is that it's interesting, but we can see that the details don't line up exactly with this mythology and Aeneas. and the book of Jasher and Angeas, but it does seem a very similar story. And then we also have the other option of Angeas. So are we looking at something that could all be connected? Is there somehow, all these three names connected, or are they different accounts? At the moment, I can't give you any more on that, but still, it gives us something very interesting or important to think about now for this region, because we have to think about all the different connections that we have now with the Midianites in this region. So the Midianites conquering, and could this name Africa being, could it be named after a descendant of Midian, so descendant of Abraham? But now we've also got the Edomites being connected with this region, with Zepho, the captain of the host of the king of Africa. So I just wanted to read something from chapter 57 to kind of try and explain why is there a connection between Edom and the king of Africa. And it says, "And Angeas, king of Daaba, did so, for he was in those days friendly to the children of Esau." So there's a friendliness between the king of Africa and the children of Esau. So is that the reason, maybe one of the reasons why Zepho flees to the king of Africa? Because of that friendliness. So we're just trying to see what we can take from this and learn from this, rather than maybe getting stuck into, getting stuck with who is Angeas, which we might never be able to really know for sure. Rather think about what could be important that we could be taking from this is, why is there a relationship between the king of Africa and Esau or Edom? And then if you try to picture that, you'd have a descendant of Esau ruling over the, the host or the army of the king of this region. And we see the relationship with Sardinia. So yeah, let's try to think about those kind of things and how it could fit with the work that we've already done. And I also want to think about Carthage. So notice here we have Carthage, and just speak a little bit about the timelines, because there is a mythological founding for Carthage with the Queen of Dido that we've already mentioned. But what is the founding of Carthage? So we generally, the date that we're given is around 814 BC. That Carthage is being settled. And this is going to be when this region slowly starts to come onto the historical record. So we're speaking about this region being very mysterious, but with the founding of Carthage and the Phoenicians coming into the wars between Carthage and the Greeks, and then Carthage and Rome, that's when this region starts to come onto the historical record. But now with this information, if we think about it, remember, let's go back to the timeline. We're looking at this timeline here with this date around 1750 BC. We've got a story of a king of Africa around this period. Near to this kingdom of Carthage, we've got a kingdom, a kingdom of Africa, 1750 BC. So that's almost like 1,000 years before the time period we've been told is the founding of Carthage. We've got kingdoms. And remember also we're thinking about the kingdom of Sardinia. It's also going to be a similar time frame. And if you try to think about some of those earlier videos where we had the Nuragic civilization of Sardinia, and we're saying, this seems like a very advanced civilization in this region, but we don't have history to go with it. Remember the picture we used here of the settlement. Look at the date. 1600 BC. We've got this, what looks like an advanced civilization, but what is the history to go with that? And it's just interesting with the book of Jasher, we have a story of a king of Africa, and a story of a king of Sardinia. Is the book of Jasher actually starting to give us the history that goes with the archaeology? Because like we were saying, the modern scholars and historians are not going to take the book of Jasher seriously. So, why are we using it and going to be, placing a lot of importance on it for our study? Is because it gives us an account, it gives us history that can actually match what we're seeing. Because we're seeing this archaeology, so it's not like we're ignoring archaeology, but we want to know what is the history that goes with this with these civilizations. And we're not getting it from if you want to say like the mainstream history, but with the mythology, and also now looking at the book of Jasher, we see that there could be a lot of events actually taking place here with in this region, and it also seems to be involving tribes or peoples from the Bible, because now we've got the Edomites being connected with this region. We've already spoken about the Philistines, and now we've also been in this video speaking about the Midianites. So it just seems to be very interesting that we have the peoples of the Bible being connected now with this region. So quite a few of those tribes, the Philistines, the Midianites, the Edomites. So it's very interesting because we're thinking about the Holy Land. Where is the Holy Land? And if we say, could the Holy Land be in sub-Saharan Africa, then you would need to, the history would need to make sense with that. The picture that you're looking at, it would need to make sense. What about the empires, and what about the different peoples of the Bible? But now we're starting to see with this information and this research, these different tribes of the Bible being connected with this region. So let's keep going with it and see what else we can discover. And what I'd like to think about for our next video is just to consider what this scholar is saying. I'm not saying that it's true, but let's just think about what the scholar is actually saying, or the researcher. So he's connecting Angeas from the book of Jasher with Angeas. Sorry, let me just have a sip of water. So I'm only just about recovering from the sickness that I had last week. Okay, so let me just finish with this part. Okay, so let me just say that again. So this scholar is connecting Angeas from the book of Jasher with Angeas from the mythology. But in the book of Jasher, Angeas is called the king of Africa. But in the mythology, Angeas is the king of Athens. So there's a few different ways you can think about that. When did Athens rule over Africa? Are we thinking about, this region here? When did Athens rule over Africa? Or is the famous Greek city of Athens, connected with Africa? So that's going to be the next part. Very interesting connection we're going to be looking at in the next part is the famous city of Greece called Athens, connected with Africa. So yeah, thank you for watching this video, and we'll see you in that next one.